So he starts off by saying that pain is inescapable part of our world. But as the inexorable forces of our post-Christian zeitgeist seeks to expel God from our collective conscious, the story that the world tries to tell us becomes hollow and hopeless, leaving us lost and unable to cope with the obstinate reality of pain. And so in the world of, ever-changing evolution, where things must die, they have to die, the strongest survive, those best suited for the environment, and it's not even towards a conception of truth, but only of survivability, as we've covered with Mitch Stokes' book, How to Be an Atheist. There's no basis for what we have for an objective truth standard. We have our chemicals firing, our synapses in the best suited for the environment until the environment changes, right, wipes us out, and then new truth patterns come about. And so
pain is just part of the deal.
Yeah,
right?
It's just it's in subjective terms, it's a good thing. The universe views pain and death as a good thing. Yeah. And we look at things like school shootings or floods or volcanoes or asteroids heading towards Earth or species wiped out or pollution as these things that are painful in an immoral way. But how do we say, other than it's icky or it's I don't like it, how can we ever say anything is bad or evil? There are just degrees of...
It's just stuff that happens.
Things that happens, right? Yeah. So we can make no sense of it in a godless worldview. And so we do everything we can to push the ugly reality out of sight. We suppress the truth of God. I believe that's somewhere in the Romans. In fact, it's Romans 1. So, of course, we're going to be always pushing back to that because that's what we want to see. And we see in our world today, especially with just all the proclivities out there, is that religious worship is evident. I mean, the past number of years have shown things replace the worship of God for things that you can't question. The dogmatic sayings that you must take from the priests that they have the guns now. But back in the 1200s, it was the ugly church that we speak out against now. But it's the scientist, it's the politician, it's the news commentator that you can't speak out against, right, or you're silenced because
they're the new priest. Right?
It's going against the religious dogma.
Yeah,
and so all men must worship is what Romans 1 tells us, and we're replacing things that keep failing us because we don't have the correct godly image that provides us this standard of a grounded, objective worldview that we are centering our response to the question, well, what about evil?
Yeah, and so this chapter, as you have started here, is called the Grace and Glory Effect, and so Christensen, given that pain is ubiquitous, right, all over the creation, and he says for those of who are paying a close attention, against all the odds and in distinction to all its competitors, the Bible comes along and dares to tell a different story about pain and what it's all about, right? He says that story doesn't ignore the pain, the tragedy, but rather transforms it into a brilliant comedy of indomitable quality. And so those who embrace this remarkable story find their own lives radically transformed. And that's what he's going to talk about here. How this part of what God is doing is not only showing his glory, but allowing us to transform our lives as well. Mm-hmm. Right?
So the transformation wrought by Christ that especially marks the lives of the beleaguered believers living in the trenches of this tragic world proves to be one of the greatest, though unexpected, apologetics for Christianity. In fact, what about evil? Exactly. What about that evil? That's a jumping off point that we can make. That's one of the things that when we talked about the tactics book, that's one of the pebbles we can put in the shoe and say, whoa, what are you talking about? Why is evil, however you define it there, first of all, define it, and second of all, why is it an incorrect thing to have in this world? Why should we, other than we don't like pain. Why is it something that we shouldn't do? The person at the gym is experiencing pain and suffering and hardship and not eating the chocolate cake, which is evil. It's evil. But through that,
the not eating of it is
right,
evil.
Yeah. Even if it's devil food cake. But through that, breaking down of muscle and then building it up to become stronger. It's one of the formations, and it's one of the things that the Apostle Paul tells us that he's done. He's run the race. He's boxed himself. He's beaten his own body. For what purpose? So that his life can be stronger in his walk of faith. And so when he faces things like beatings and shipwrecks and poisoning and viper bites that he throws into the fire and people trying to put him up as being a god or a person to listen to above anybody else surrounding him, he knows that those hardships have kind of molded him into having this testimony that he points away from himself, but then points back to Christ there. So it involves a display of weakness, humility, unearthly love, compassion, perseverance under trial, and forgiveness of vile offenders. It's what Larry Taunton calls the grace effect.
Good. So what is this transforming grace and this grace effect all about? Well, he says the distinguishing measure of Christianity's claim to truth lies in its unprecedented, unexpected, undeserved, and transformative power of the gospel in the lives of lowly sinners, right? That's what it's all about. Eleanor Stump describes how prolonged evil and suffering, notice, produces a longing for goodness and redemption that only such desperate conditions can evoke, right? So this suffering and evil and that sort of thing, we know, it seems instinctively, that there's something better. And so it produces a longing for that, right? A desperation for that, right? And so that's part of this transforming grace that he wants us to see here.
Right. So when people are enslaved to sin and bitterness, when they are used to pain and disillusionment, and then unexpectedly the resplendent beams of blessing and redemption invade their cold, gray hovel, it sends shockwaves through every room. It's this renewing. It's more than a feeling. It's getting the cobwebs. It's the spring cleaning. You knock out all the stuff. You get rid of the junk and. It's like you have a new home that you're looking at. It arrests them, chokes them, and releases all the tension that holds back the pain. It forces all the pent-up emotions that lay dormant to rise to the surface and come alive. Darkness gives birth to hope. Stump argues that tears of joy are always connected to a suffering.
Good.